All right, Matthew 6, starting in verse 1. Beware of practicing your piety before others in order to be seen by them, for then you have no reward from your Father in heaven. So whenever you give alms, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, so that they may be praised by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you give alms, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your alms may be done in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Verse 16. And whenever you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces so as to show others that they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen not by others, but by your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. I was reading an interesting blog post the other day by Morgan Housel, who gave me a little history lesson that I want to share with you all this morning. You see, before 1850 or so, products that were made, any product that you had that was a part of your life, you likely got it because you yourself made it, first of all. And if you didn't make it, probably your neighbor down the street made it. It was very much a time of local products, far before any of our current craze of things that were made local. Back then, it was local, all right. It had to be local because there was no other way. And the benefit of that was that if you had a problem with the product, you knew exactly who to go to try to make it right. First of all, you'd look at yourself. You'd go to the mirror, first of all, or then you'd go down to your neighbor and say, hey, whatever, this thing you made for me, it's got a little problem there, and you would help make it right then and there. But then the Industrial Revolution came along. And the Industrial Revolution, for all of its good things, like, for example, railroads and other things, that people started moving around a whole lot more. For the first time in history, a lot of our people that lived in many rural areas started coming into the cities to find work and to find a livelihood for their family. Railroads allowed the travel of not just people, but also of goods for the first time as well. And so now things that were once local became more regional. You had regional suppliers of things like food and other products. And so now, whereas before you had some kind of local accountability going on for products, with things moving to regional, that became a lot harder. People started to not know where did their food come from, or where did the products that they had, where did they exactly come from? And as a result, the quality of products started to suffer greatly. One publication I read about specifically the food industry and the canned meat industry, which canned meat even today sounds kind of funny to me, but especially in that time, the canned meat industry, one publication said, you cannot trust it at all. You never know if you're going to open a can of meat to find it being rotten or extra watery. Neither of things sound very good to me, let alone to anybody, I can imagine. And so you can imagine, in this day and age, the trust in the food industry was at an all-time low. No one wants to pop open a can of rotten meat. Now, this all changed in the Civil War era. Because, see, in the Civil War time, there was one company in particular, the Underwood Company, who developed a strategy. They knew that they had to send large quantities of food to Union soldiers, and yet the problem remained. How are they going to be relevant, and how are they going to sell their product in an industry that nobody trusted? And so this company came up with a solution. They said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to come up with a picture that we're going to slap on every single one of our cans so that everyone that buys this can will know that it's coming from this particular company. And we're going to put a little label on there that talks about our process and our standards for making it. So if there's any issues, they'll know exactly who to contact. And you can rest assured that if you buy this product, it is guaranteed. What they created was the very first brand. And nowadays, of course, we know that brands are all over the place. The very first brand was done by the Underwood Company, and it was for deviled canned ham. Sounds good, right? But it established in an industry in a day where trust was hard to come by, it established trust. I've been thinking about that this week because I've been thinking about our own day and time. And in our own day and time, I think we are struggling with trust in a lot of ways too, right? In a whole lot of different industries. Everybody feel pretty good about our economy. Everyone have a lot of faith and trust. Everybody feeling good about our retirement plans and everything going on there. How about the government? We all feel good about our government from the state and national level. Everyone feeling good. I got a lot of trust there. What are all these heads are shaking? I don't understand, right? I think about the church. Think about religion. Can't tell you how many people I've talked to that have been hurt by the church, or maybe they have a vision or a version of the church that they read on the headlines and they don't encounter real people that makes them have a lot of hesitation when it comes to the church. You know, I don't know, maybe I follow different news since I'm more plugged in, of course, to the church world, but it feels like every few months I read about another scandal involving some leader in the church. Breaks my heart. I've been reading about a bunch of news stories this week about people seemingly doing normal things, pulling into the wrong driveway or whatever else. Perhaps you've seen some of this, and the trust and the fear seems like at an all-time high in our country. And I could make, that's serious big things, but I even think about how I could tell you, I could probably make 3 different meals by all the food that's left out of all my carry-out orders these days, right? You can't even trust that to happen, right? It's big things and it's small things. Trust feels like it's hard to come by these days. And I wonder what got us to this place of really, really low trust in all of these areas. And this is probably a bigger conversation than we have time for today, but I know that, being isolated for a few years didn't help. When you're isolated from people, it allows suspicion to grow. It allows trust to be very low. It's hard these days to sort out truth from fiction, fact from Photoshop, from all the fake information that's out there and what's real. It's hard. Not to mention all the scandals that we've already talked about. It's a time when faith in our institutions and even in our churches is very low. And the question that I wrestle with is, how can we earn back trust? How can we have trust in our lives? And how can we as a church earn back people's trust? And if you'll forgive me for using kind of language of the marketplace, I think it's so important because I believe that as Christians, we have the very best product in the world for people to have. Or maybe product isn't there. We have someone who is worth investing your whole life in, who is worth investing in your hope and everything else in your life in. And how can we bring that product or that person to a world that struggles with trust? The question I wonder is, what will be our brand? What will be the thing that helps us earn back trust? Now, as we talk about this, it's important to remember that when we're talking about branding and trust, it's important to remember that your brand is not your marketing. Your brand is not your marketing. Sure, marketing and self-promotion has its place in life and in the church, absolutely. But Jesus, in our passage, claimed that there are a whole lot of religious people that are much more concerned about creating and promoting a very slick marketing campaign, while their brand, the integrity and the consistency of their brand is suffering. Right? Notice all the marketing efforts that go on in our passage there in verses 1 through 6 and 16 through 18. Jesus talked about trumpets sounding for the praise of others. He talked about street corner praying to be seen by others. And he talked about fasting in a way that has your disheveled faces so that others might take notice and recognize that you're fasting. See, marketing attempts, our marketing efforts, they attempt on controlling how others see us. They attempt and focus on telling your story, perhaps, or telling a version of your story. Right? We all want to have ourselves be seen in the very best of light, and kind of minimize all the areas of life that we would really not like to point out to others. But Jesus here recognizes there's a problem that comes with that. There's a problem when we focus too much on our marketing attempts and not enough on the substance of the product that we're selling. And especially sometimes we can believe our marketing so much that we can become to believe it and become to believe it's the truth when maybe it isn't so very true. Just because we spin ourselves one way doesn't mean it's how it actually is. Anybody ever gone to some fast food places and the food has not been anything, or it has been anything but fast, right? Or I think about how Volkswagen years ago had this campaign about how their vehicles were extra clean and safe, and they were really, really good for the environment. Well, then come to find out they had actually had a product that allowed them to, when your car was getting tested by the emissions, it switched on so that it would fool the emissions test. So then actually when you got out into the real world, it switched off, so then it started spewing whatever else into the environment. Ooh, just because we spend ourselves one way doesn't mean it's how it actually is, right? And Jesus has a word for this. Hypocrites, stage actors, those who put on a show out there for everyone to see, who market themselves in one way, but actually inside may be a little different. Maybe another story being told. Jesus says that the real danger comes from the fact that when we market yourselves so much one way that you have an inability to listen to any sort of feedback on how you actually might be. And this is the difference between marketing and the power of your brand. Because your brand, the power of your brand comes from the consistency and the integrity between your marketed statements about your product and the actual experience of people who use them. The actual experience of people that you interact with. Think about it, the power, and that's the power of a brand. Right? I think about how, for me, I think about some of the brands that I know and love, right? I know that the Chaco sandals that I love, and I would wear them right now if I could, they're a reliable brand. Normally you'll see me wearing them from probably March to November because that's just what I love to do, right? They're reliable, they're sturdy, they're steadfast. Apple, one of the brands that I love, they make superior products. They also make it so that you'll have to buy a new phone charger every version that comes out. I can't stand that part of the brand, right? But if you buy that product, it'll be a very good product. But it doesn't have to be great products. It could be even things like Taco Bell. It's not gourmet food, but you know what you're going to get, right? It's consistent. It's reliable. It's cheap. It's fast. It'll likely give you problems later, but it is a good food. It's a reliable brand, right? And that's the thing. The power of brand comes from the consistency that they offer. The consistency that they offer. You can say all you want, but if you're not consistent in word and in deed, you won't have a lot to say out in the world. And for Jesus, he seemed to think that our efforts should always lie in building our brand before the Father in a quiet, hidden manner, far before we do any sort of self-promotional efforts in front of others. And therein lies the rub. Because building a brand before God, it's a lot slower. Because earning trust, it takes time. It takes consistency. Trust is earned over time. And as leaders and as followers of Jesus, it takes time to earn people's trust. And the way we do that is through our consistent presence, through showing up when we say we're going to show up, through following through by doing what we say we're going to do, through being accountable when maybe we don't live up to those standards, through owning up our mistakes or our shortcomings. And that takes time. Will we walk with people long enough that we earn their trust? That is the question we have to wrestle with. As the saying goes, people don't care what you know until they know that you care. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. They don't care what you know until they know that you care. Building a brand before God is also less visible. We live in an age of marketing, right? We live in an age of people waving their arms and speaking loud voices to try to be noticed. We live in a time of people trying to grab our attention, of providing clickbait for us to click on, of products to sell and content to promote. And there is a place and time for some of those things. But in this day and age, cultivating a life that is hidden, a hidden life of giving, of praying, of serving, of fasting, that'll make us relevant before God first and foremost, before we're ever relevant before others, is a challenge. And it requires humility. With marketing, you control and design the message that you want to send out. But with building a brand, it requires you to listen to feedback. It requires you to say, well, is other people's experience of me actually different than what maybe I think of myself? Perhaps one of the best questions and the hardest questions we can ask the people in our lives. As a leader, one of the best questions is, how do you perceive my leadership? What is it like being led by me? Is it a good experience? Is it not? Is it one that you would want to continue or not? What about that same kind of question for us as husbands, fathers, mothers, friends, coworkers? How do you perceive me as a husband, as a father, as a mother? How do you perceive me as a wife or a friend? That's a hard question because it requires us to get rid of our perception and actually listen to feedback and do something with it. I think the church has lost a lot of trust in our day and age. And some of it has come from shifting cultural values, sure, that the church opposes, and there'll always be friction there. But some of it has come from the fact that far too often our marketing attempts and who we actually are very different things. And I think God is calling us to be a church and to be people that are very, very humble, that listen to what others are saying and respond with, how can we actually earn back your trust? The temptation will be for the church to have the loudest voice, to self-promote all the good we do, and to compete for people's attention, to go for the sizzle when what we really need is much more substance. And then to determine how we can market a story that is based around the goodness of God and the glory of God, that God is working in us and through us, and sometimes despite us, and most of all, and I pray, through us for others. That is what our story, that's what all our marketing attempts should be. The glory of God working in us and through us, and sometimes even despite us. And I think about some of the times that I try to, I think about some of the times when I try to do things specifically to be seen by others. When I'll clean the house a little extra so that maybe Katie might notice that I've done a little bit more, right? Or sometimes I might talk up one of my accomplishments in hopes that people might see that and think, "Woo, wow, look at that great thing that he has done." All right? Or I think about some of the times I do those things, all the times that I'm tempted to do things to be seen by others. It usually comes from some place in my heart that I feel like I'm lacking. Right? To try to get a pat on the back, or to get a sense of significance, or to get a little bit more love, or to get a little bit more recognition because maybe I'm feeling like I'm not enough in some way. And maybe you've had that experience as well. And I think about the times when maybe I not try to let my accomplishments be seen by others, but the times when I try to hide things from others, that they may not see those things. And those are usually things that I'm ashamed of, or things I'm embarrassed about of myself, to try to keep up a certain image that others might not see those parts of me and think less of me. And maybe you all have played that game sometimes in your life as well. We live afraid of what we might lose if people might really knew who we actually are. And as I think about that temptation to try to inflate ourselves to be a little bit greater than we are, and as I think about that temptation to try to hide parts of ourselves, in all of that we don't feel like we're enough. We don't feel like we measure up. And as I look at this cross and as I think about the good news of Jesus, we see that before Jesus, we got nothing to hide. It's all laid bare before him. He sees us as we actually are, not all of our marketing attempts to be better than we think we are. He sees all the things that we're ashamed of and we try to hide, the things that we don't want others to see, and yet his love for us is consistent. It's pure. He believes that we're enough. He believes that his mercy and grace is a free gift of him to us and not something that we have to earn. It's not something that we have to try to manipulate and pull out of him. It's how he actually feels about us. The cross and the resurrection, it is God who sees all of us, no self-promotion in front of him, and yet he gives his grace and his love to us so freely. And so if you're here this morning and you feel like you don't measure up, if you're here this morning and you feel like there's this constant feeling like I've got to do more or I've got to be more, I hope and pray that you'll recognize that in Jesus you are enough. That he loves you as you actually are, and that you don't have to hide anything or be who you're not. But that in his love, he will draw out the very best of us. And he will allow those places within us that we try to hide. As we bring them before him, he will heal it with his love. We have nothing to be afraid of. And so I just want to end by reading 1 Corinthians chapter 13. You often hear this passage in weddings a lot of times. You know, you'll have it read about what love is. And I just want to read it in the sense of, maybe in the sense of marriage, but in the sense of God's marriage to us in Christ, as Paul talks about in Ephesians. I want you to hear this and hear it as God's love for you. Because I often read this as what I need to do for God, but just hear it as how God feels about you. This is Christ's love for you. His love is patient. His love is kind. His love is not envious or boastful or arrogant over us or rude. His love for you does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. Christ does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but he rejoices in the truth in our lives. Jesus bears all things. He believes all things. He hopes all things for us. He endures all things for you. So may we give up all our marketing attempts. May we give up all our self-promotion and be who we actually are and trust that his love is enough. May we be a church that is humble and recognizes all the ways that we blow it and don't get it right. All the ways that we need to listen to others, even from those in the world that might have something to say to us. And let us not hide our weaknesses from one another, but let us come together and share in what Christ is doing within us. In this time of great fear that we live in, a great fear of one another, may our brand as a church be one of faithful trust. Trust in God and trust in seeing our neighbors not through a lens of threat, but through a lens of welcome and hospitality. You're safe with me. I'm not afraid of you, and you don't have to be afraid of me. You are welcome in my presence. In this time of great pain and hurt, may our brand be one of presence and hope and serving to our neighbors. In this time of great apathy, spiritual apathy, may our brand be one of steadfast loyalty to the truth. When people pop open our brand of Christianity, may they not find it rotten, nor may they not find it watered down, but may we be loyal to the truth and the grace of Jesus expressed in His Word. And may we truly live in that kind of loyalty and assurance that Christ truly is the way, the truth, and the life. What will be our brand here at Brush Hill? What will be our brand? I hope and pray that it is a brand of God's love, that it's not fake, but that it's real and that it meets us and meets those that we encounter with His love and grace and trust. Let's pray.